Hey guys, Jason here. The long-awaited tutorial that I'll be promising you guys for rendering out of Adobe Media Encoder is here, finally. I apologize for the wait. So I've kind of just opened up the exercise from week 4 where we did our ball and tail. This was my sort of rough animation for that. And up until now, the rendering process has been as follows, right? So we could either go composition, and then add to render queue, alright, and then that opens up in our timeline. It ends up I can't talk tonight, I apologize. It is late. It opens up our render queue in the timeline, right? So under best settings, render settings rather, we just want this to say best, alright? What this means is that quality is set to the highest, alright, and our resolution, our composition is set to the full resolution. Alright, so the resolution for this project is 1920 by 1080. Okay, that's the standard that we should all be working in at this point. So setting it on full just means that it's going to render the full resolution of that. If I were to set this to half, you'll see that it's telling me what my initial settings are, but this is the size of the video at the end of it. So this would work, for example, if I were needing to send this to a client. And I wanted to just give them like a very sort of mediocre resolution render so that they could see what was happening, but they couldn't rip me off sort of like by stealing the test render and not paying me, right? If I send them a half resolution render, they're not going to be able to air it on television, or you know, they're going to look like trash if they air it in their advertisement. So a small trick that you could do for that. This also means a smaller render, right? Like file size is great, the render's going to be smaller. So what that means is that if you are struggling for something, for example with something, you could always render out like a half resolution file and you could upload that to Google Drive a lot faster. I could download it faster and I could give you feedback faster, right? But we're going to leave it on full for now. Okay, so that's basically the render settings in a nutshell. Under that is our output module. Now, if you remember back to that story that I told you, we never render lossless. Okay, rendering lossless is a bad idea because this renders out massive files, right? So like a small 2-second animation, which should only be like 20 megs in a normal H.264 render, could end up being 20 gigabytes. Okay, and that's going to kill your cap trying to upload. I've got a 1 meg line at home. I'm never going to be able to download that at home. And then downloading that at work is not it's not a viable option if you want fast feedback. All right, so handing in like assignments and things, that's never a good idea. Also, like video players such as VLC and QuickTime, they have to sort of buffer the video footage, right? They're better at it than, for example, a streaming site like YouTube because they don't have to download the data, but they still need to sort of compile the frames or the images in the sequence to then play back to you. The minute that you try to play sort of video files that are like 10 gigs or bigger, VLC starts to crash. QuickTime sort of can't handle the footage, so there's just no pro at this stage to rendering an AVI lossless file. Alright, so under format, if we click on this drop down, we always choose QuickTime. Okay, if we're doing sort of depending on the project, you sometimes might need to, for example, have a PNG sequence or a Photoshop sequence, but QuickTime is the go-to option. Alright, so QuickTime, sorted, and then we have our format options. Now this is where a lot of people seem to sort of struggle. I'm running an older version of After Effects because I'm a bit of a pirate at home, I'll admit. I've got the H.264 codec option. Alright, it came native with my installation of After Effects. Okay, some of you don't have this option, and that's the purpose of today's tutorial. So if you don't have this option, animation then is our second go-to option. But there's a lot of benefits to H.264 that animation doesn't have. First of all, animation tends to be 10 times the file size. So for a small render, like what we're doing here today with this small ball bounce exercise, an H.264 file will render out, and this might be 20 megs sort of maximum. Alright, an animation file might then be 200 megs. So again, and there would be no difference in quality. Alright, so it just means that a smaller file size for like no lack or no loss of quality, that's a big plus. It's just a faster upload, it's a faster download. You can get that sort of hand in faster to me or to client, and everyone's happy. Alright, so if we don't have the H.264 option, alright, we don't have this option at all, what we could also do is composition. We've got the option to add to Adobe Media Encoder queue. Alternatively, file, export, add to Adobe Media Encoder queue. Alright, After Effects is infamous for having multiple ways to do the same thing. Alright, so we're going to select this option. What then happens is that if you don't already have Media Encoder open, the program will launch. Alright, and this is pretty much what it looks like. Now, this effectively is our project panel. The same way that we have a project panel inside of After Effects. I could navigate my entire sort of computer, like all my storage files. I could navigate specifically to this save file, and I could load up the save file straight away. You can see here I've got a couple of Premiere files that I had set up for a personal project I was doing a little while back. But I can skip that step by sort of sending the file straight here from After Effects, and I could send it straight here from Premiere as well. Alright, my preset browser, I sort of never really mess around with this. I don't really have a reason to. I've set myself up with my output over here. Under this drop down, right, we've got H.264, and that's what we want. Okay, so we do also still have the option of QuickTime. So if I were to select QuickTime there, we could then go for something along the lines of match source. Okay, what match source means is that it's going to take the settings from After Effects and it's going to apply them inside of Adobe Media Encoder. Alright, alternatively, H.264 match source high bitrate is the option that I would suggest. What this means is that we've got a high quality version of our settings. Alright, but if we hit this drop down, you'll see that we have got a massive list of options. Again, I could sort of scroll through this with my arrow keys. A lot of presets. These aren't necessarily going to be the most up-to-date ones, but at the time of this version of After Media Encoder's release, these were the up-to-date specs. So we've got specifically for Vimeo, we've got for YouTube if that's what we were going for. We've got HD 1080p 25, which is the preset that we're working on. So I could naturally just set this, but this should be your sort of base standard option. When you select H.264, this should be the first thing that pops up. We're sorted. This is all we need to do. Alright, and then the output file. Now this is the exact same as it is in After Effects. I click on this and I tell it where I want to render to. Okay, like we've said before, we try not to render to the desktop. Okay, we want to render to a folder. I've got it over here. We'll just call this ball tail test render. Okay, and then we'll save. Sorted. All I have left to do now is hit this little green button and it's going to render out. If I drag this up, you can see it's thinking at the moment. That's what this sort of chevroned blue line means. And we can see the render process taking place. Finished. This render is done. It's got a tick. If there's an error or if it crashes halfway through, you'll have a exclamation mark here instead. And that way you'll know exactly what needs to be done, like which ones need to be re-rendered. Now, that covers how to render with a Adobe Media Encoder, but it doesn't necessarily cover why, so I'd like to quickly discuss that. Feel free to stick around, otherwise cheers. Okay, so Adobe Media Encoder is very cool because it acts as a render library separate outside of After Effects. So, for example, if I were to render a couple of projects. Let's say that I was in your position and I was reworking my ball tail animation, my ball bounce animation, and my walk cycle animation. And deadline's coming up. I've got literally an hour left to hand in, and I need not only to render, but I still need to finish my walk cycle animation. Alright, so I've made the changes to the ball and bounce, I've made my changes to my ball and tail, I've got a couple more changes to make to the walk cycle, and then I need to render all of them. Thankfully, these exercises are quite small. They're not going to take hours to render, but you can imagine that if the clock is ticking, you don't want to be stuck in the position where you have to decide, do I get my first 2 rendered and be late with the 3rd hand in, or do I get my animation done and be late with all 3 renders? Like, we don't want to be left with that catch-22 choice. Now, the cool thing about Adobe Media Encoder is that it can render multiple files and still allow you to work in After Effects. So, I could be working on my ball and tail animation while this was rendering out my walk cycle and my ball and bounce. Whereas if I wanted to render outside of After Effects, I would have to wait for After Effects to finish rendering before I could then open the next file and carry on animating. This is not something that you guys are going to have to be juggling with, but sort of like from a personal anecdote experience, I used to work sort of on TV title sequences, and we would have to sort of render out multiple versions. So it was like, you know, this television show X is on tonight at 9, Thursdays at 9, next Thursday at 9, it's on next, it's on later tonight. Like, we would have multiple versions of the same thing that had to be rendered, and we wouldn't have time to sit and wait for every single one of them to render out, because we were working with quite high quality assets, and it would take about 5 minutes to render, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're rendering out sort of 300 of these things a day, that adds up, right? That's a lot of dead time sitting and waiting where you could actually just be animating. So Adobe Media Encoder became my best friend, because I could literally just stack all of them up in here, hit play, and have them begin to render while I continued to finish my animation, which meant that I met my deadline at the end of the day and I could go home before midnight. Alright, so just keep this program in mind in the future. It's a very helpful thing. The other cool thing as well, for example, you render out for if we were to render out, so let's do this quickly. Composition, add to render queue. I'm just going to get rid of the first one. So we've got our best settings full. Cool. Let's say I make a massive mistake. I accidentally render out an AVI file. Right? I would shun myself. I would never forgive myself. But if I were to quickly find, where's this folder that we're working with? Week 4 exercise. Alright. I'm going to render out a lossless file. We're going to see how long this takes. Okay. Thankfully, not too long. Let's see how big that file is. Properties. And, okay, cool. 361 megs doesn't sound like a lot, but let's keep in mind that that is 361 megabytes for 5 seconds of animation. If this was a 1 minute animation, or if this had more assets or effects or presets in here, that would be gigs big, right? We don't want that. So if I've made that mistake, I literally don't have time now to re-render. Okay, deadline is in 5 minutes and I need to get a quick render out and be done with it. What I can also do is I can drag this video into my timeline in Adobe Media Encoder, right? So if I drag it over, we get 2 options. Add here to add as a separate source. If I was dragging in 3 or 4 videos and I dropped them in on the left side of the sort of panel over here, it would add them as 3 or 4 separate videos. If I dropped it on the right, stitch here, sort of stitch clips together, it would then stitch all 5 of those videos into one. So generally we don't want to drop on this side, we want to drop on this side, right? So I can drop it in, boom. Now I can change everything. Okay, I can set this to H.264, I can set it to have my native sort of bitrate, or I could go down to HD, where do we see it? HD 1080p 25, okay, that gives me a nice high quality. I could then re-render it, okay, re-render, and if I were to render that out, boom, done. Now we can compare. So this one is sitting on, here it is, 361 megabytes. The re-render sitting on 294 kilobytes. Alright, so that's like literally like 1% of the size. Okay, super quick to re-render. Okay, I didn't have to sit through this entire thing. If this was a very big animation out of After Effects, this could have taken anywhere between a couple of hours to a full day to render. Simply dropping the actual video, because all the sort of mathematical processing has been done in After Effects, this is just a flat video file. Dropping it into Adobe Media Encoder allows me to re-render it super quickly and to get the size down. So hopefully that helps cover things out a little bit, makes it a little bit easier to understand. Yeah. let me know if you guys find this useful. I hope that this will stand in place to help those of you who are struggling to render H.264. And now that this tutorial's been made, we don't have an excuse anymore, right? So I've taken away your excuse to not render small H.264 files. All right, thanks very much, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.